Hello everyone, you are on the channel Who Created It and How. Today, we're diving into a topic that governs our entire lives. Time, specifically. How did our ancestors figure out how to count the days? We take it for granted now with digital clocks and calendars on every device. But the journey to our modern system of timekeeping is a fascinating story of human ingenuity, observation, and a whole lot of trial and error. It all started with the most obvious celestial bodies, the sun and the moon. Long before written history, ancient people noticed the daily cycle of light and darkness. The rising and setting of the sun was the most fundamental unit of time. One sunrise to the next, that's one day. It was simple, reliable, and universal. Early hunter-gatherer societies likely didn't need much more than that. Their lives were dictated by the immediate needs of finding food and shelter, so day and night were sufficient. But as societies evolved into agricultural communities, just counting days wasn't enough. Farmers needed to know when to plant their crops and when to harvest them. They needed a longer-term calendar. This is where the moon came into play. Our ancestors observed its regular, predictable cycle. It waxes from a sliver to a full circle and then wanes back to nothing before reappearing. This cycle, from one new moon to the next, takes about 29.5 days. This became the basis for the month. The word month itself is derived from the word moon. Many early civilizations, like the ancient Babylonians, Egyptians, and Greeks, created lunar calendars based on these cycles. They would count 12 lunar months and call that a year. But here's the problem. 12 lunar months add up to about 354 days. That's roughly 11 days shorter than a full solar year, the time it takes for the Earth to orbit the Sun. Why does that matter? Well, the seasons are tied to the solar year, not the lunar one. So if you're a farmer using a purely lunar calendar, your planting and harvesting dates would drift earlier and earlier each year. After a few years, your calendar might say it's planting season. But outside, it's still the dead of winter. This is called seasonal drift, and it was a huge problem. Different cultures came up with clever ways to solve this. The Babylonians, for example, would occasionally add an extra month to their year to realign their calendar with the seasons. This is called intercalation. It was a bit messy though. The decision to add a month was often made by priests or rulers, and sometimes it was based on political or economic reasons rather than purely astronomical ones. The ancient Egyptians took a different approach. They lived and died by the Nile River. Its annual flood was the single most important event of their year, as it deposited fertile silt that made agriculture possible. They noticed that the flood always came shortly after the star Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, reappeared on the eastern horizon just before sunrise after being hidden for about 70 days. This event, known as the heliacal rising of Sirius, happened once every 365 days. Using this observation, the Egyptians created one of the first solar calendars. They divided the year into 12 months of 30 days each. That gives you 360 days. To get closer to the 365-day solar year, they added 5 extra days at the end of the year. These 5 days were not part of any month. They were special festival days dedicated to the birthdays of their gods. It was a brilliant and much more stable system. But even the Egyptian calendar wasn't perfect. The actual solar year is about 365.25 days long. That extra quarter of a day might not seem like much, but over time, it adds up. Every 4 years, the Egyptian calendar would be off by a full day. Over a century, that's 25 days. Again, the seasons would start to drift. This brings us to the Romans, and the calendar that forms the direct basis of our own, the Julian calendar. The original Roman calendar was a mess. It was a lunar calendar that had been tinkered with so much for political reasons that by the time of Julius Caesar, it was about 3 months out of sync with the seasons. Caesar, having spent time in Egypt, saw the superiority of their solar calendar. In 46 BC, he consulted with the astronomer Sosigenes of Alexandria and instituted a major reform. First, to fix the massive drift, he made the year 46 BC incredibly long, 445 days long. It's known as the Year of Confusion. Then he established the new Julian calendar. It was based on the Egyptian model, 365 days a year, with a twist. To account for that extra quarter of a day, Caesar introduced the leap year. Every 4 years, an extra day would be added to the calendar, making that year 366 days long. This was a massive improvement in accuracy. The months were also reorganized to have the 30 or 31 days we are familiar with today, and he even renamed one of the months after himself, July. His successor, Augustus, would later do the same, giving us August. The Julian calendar was the standard in the Western world for over 1600 years. It was a fantastic system, but it had one tiny flaw. Remember how the solar year is about 365 and a quarter days? Well, the about is important. The true length of a solar year is actually 365.22 days. The Julian calendar assumes it's exactly 365.25 days. This difference is tiny, just about 11 minutes and 14 seconds per year. But over centuries, those minutes add up. By the 16th century, the Julian calendar had drifted by about 10 days relative to the seasons. This became a significant problem for the Catholic Church, particularly for calculating the date of Easter, which is tied to the spring equinox. So in 1582, Pope Gregory III introduced another reform. He decreed that 10 days would be skipped to bring the calendar back in line. So in Catholic countries, the day after October 4th, 1582, was October 15th, 1582. Imagine waking up and finding out you just lost 10 days. To prevent this drift from happening again, the new Gregorian calendar adjusted the leap year rule. The Julian rule was a leap year every 4 years. The Gregorian rule is slightly more complex. A year is a leap year if it's divisible by 4, unless it's a century year divisible by 100 but not by 400. So the year 2000 was a leap year because it's divisible by 400. But the years 1700, 1800 and 1900 were not leap years. This subtle change makes the Gregorian calendar incredibly accurate. It's off by only about 26 seconds per year, meaning it will take over 3,000 years for it to drift by a single day. Of course, the adoption of the Gregorian calendar wasn't immediate. Protestant and Eastern Orthodox countries were suspicious of a decree from the Pope and resisted the change. Great Britain and its American colonies didn't switch until 1752, by which point they had to skip 11 days. Russia didn't switch until after the 1917 revolution. This is why the October Revolution actually happened in November according to the Gregorian calendar. And what about the week? The 7-day week isn't directly tied to any obvious solar or lunar cycle. Its origin is a bit more cultural. The Babylonians were likely the first to use it. They revered the number 7, possibly because they observed 7 celestial bodies that moved against the background of fixed stars: the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. They named each day after one of these celestial god beings. This tradition was adopted by the Jews, who codified the 7-day week in their creation story, with God resting on the 7th day. Through the spread of Judaism and later Christianity and Islam, the 7-day week became a standard feature of timekeeping across much of the world, even though it doesn't fit neatly into the 30-day month or the 365-day year. So, from staring at the sun and moon to tracking the stars, to performing complex mathematical calculations, the way we count the days is a testament to thousands of years of human observation, problem solving, and collaboration. Our calendar is not just a tool, it's a historical document, a blend of astronomy, religion, and politics that has been refined over millennia. Every time you check the date, you are connecting with a story that began with our earliest ancestors, looking up at the sky and wondering. Thanks for joining us on this journey through time. If you found this fascinating, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Who Created It and How for more stories behind the world we live in. See you next time.